Hello and welcome to the first of three discussions dealing with the place function. Uh, we will talk in this discussion, we will talk about marketing intermediaries, and following videos we'll talk about marketing channels, and also logistics. Given I'm a logistics guy, we're going to spend a little more time on logistics than I think most typical principles of marketing courses spend. So in this discussion, marketing intermediaries, we're going to first define what's meant by a marketing intermediary, and we're going to focus uh, most of the discussion on retailers, a particular type of intermediary, in part because, again, I'm kind of going on so what kinds of experiences have most of us had in our life, and most of us have had experiences with multiple kinds of retailers, and not so much with other kinds of intermediaries such as wholesalers. And in addition to talking about retailers, we're going to talk specifically about how retailers can be categorized, and then we'll conclude the video by discussing the concept of multi-channel marketing, which is one of the challenges with this particular discussion and with the place discussion is, um, do I do marketing intermediaries first, or I do channels first? And because there's a tremendous synergy between both marketing channels and marketing intermediaries. So we could just as easily talk about multi-channel marketing with respect to marketing channels, but I choose to talk about it with respect to retailers. So anyway, let's get started with a discussion of what is meant by a marketing intermediary. And a marketing intermediary can be defined as an organization that facilitates exchange and purchase of products between the manufacturer and consumers. So an organization that facilitates exchange and purchase of products between the manufacturer and consumer. And probably the two best known examples of intermediaries are wholesalers and retailers. And again, we're going to focus primarily on retailers because, as I said earlier, most of us have had multiple experiences or experiences with multiple kinds of retailers. And you said, well, what is a retailer? Um, and a retailer is simply an organization that sells products to the final customer. Simple enough. So, McDonald's would be a retailer, 7-Eleven's a retailer, Walmart's a retailer, uh, True North convenience store sells Shell gasoline. That's a retailer. There you go. Yeah, I got you. Okay, so we're going to focus on retailers. And one of the things that we can talk about with respect to retailers are the categories of retailers, and we'll talk about three categories of retailers, or three ways that retailers can be categorized, and one is based on the amount of service that retailers offer. A second is what is a retailer's organizational approach, and the third is looking at retailers based on the product line or the product lines that they sell. So the first involves the amount of service that's provided, and a common categorization in terms of the amount of service provided goes, um, you got full service on one end of the spectrum, and you've got self-service on the other end of the spectrum. So full service retailers provide a tremendous amount of service to the customer, whereas so that might be manifested in terms of in-store personnel. So, for example, if you've ever been into a Nordstrom's, um, I don't think they get real in your face about it, but you don't walk very far in a Nordstrom's once you've entered before some person that's employed by Nordstrom comes up to you. So Nordstrom's would be an example of a full service retailer. On the other hand, you've got self-service retailers, and this is where the customer provides most of the service. And someplace like a Walmart, type of Walmart type store might be a good example of a self-service retailer. In part because, yes, when you walk into Walmart, there's often the Walmart greeter there, but once you get into a Walmart, sometimes it takes you a while to find in-store personnel. And at a number of Walmarts, you can check yourself out, right? So self-checkout, right? And again, this goes back to the value co-creation concept that we talked about. But increasingly, retailers are offering customers self-serve options. And one of which is the self checkout. So, one way that retailers can be categorized is based on the amount of service provided. And if you start thinking about the amount of services provided, full service versus self-service, there tends to be a difference in the prices that are offered by those particular stores. So, a place like a Nordstrom's, which, to be fair, is a higher end department store. Nordstrom prices tend to be higher than perhaps a Sears, which is another type of department store, but which might not have as much service. And then you get to a place like a Walmart, which is more self-service, right? And you can go even more bare bones than Walmart. I mean, if you go to like an Aldi, ALDI, right, a German-based grocery chain, they they don't really, they don't have shelves as traditional grocery stores have shelves, and you got to bring your own, bags and things like that. So retailers can be categorized by the level of service or the amount of service that they provide. Retailers can also be, pardon me while I have a sip of soda. Retailers can also be categorized in terms of their organizational approach. And one organizational approach is what is known as an independent retailer. And an independent retailer is defined as a locally owned and operated retailer. And in the Northeast Ohio or the Cleveland market, there's actually an association that's known as the Cleveland Independent Restaurants. And so there's a number of restaurants that are not part of chains, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, but they're considered independent restaurants. Examples would be Flower, which is a restaurant that's over in Moreland Hills, and Blue Canyon, which is a restaurant down in Twinsburg. And so they're locally owned and they're locally operated. So that would be considered an independent retailer. And then you have the kind of the quintessential chain store. And a definition, because there's again, like a lot of other things that we've talked about so far this semester, there's not a uniform definition of what's meant by a chain store or a chain retailer. But one definition that I like to use is that a chain refers to a retailer that has 10 or more stores that are operated under one brand name and has a central headquarters. So again, one definition of a chain retailer or chain store is that it has 10 or more stores that are operated under one brand name and have a central headquarters. So for example, some of you are from the Rochester, Buffalo area. Wegmans grocery retailer would be an example of a chain store. Zara would be an example of a chain store. McDonald's would be an example of a chain store, and we can give lots of other examples of chain stores. So we've talked about the amount of service provided. We've talked about the organizational approach. And then a third way that retailers can be categorized is in terms of product line. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time breaking down all the different product lines, in part because your book does a really nice job of discussing how retailers can be classified according to product line. But what I would like to spend a little bit of time discussing is the challenges anymore in classifying a retailer based on product lines, in part because of a concept known as retail convergence, which refers to a variety of retailers who sell the same product at similar prices to the same customers. So that's kind of muddied the waters because you got a lot of places selling a lot of things that maybe in the past would have been sold by more what are known as specialty stores, right? Stores that have a narrower product line, maybe decent amount of depth, but a pretty narrow product line. So, for example, if we go back 50 years, I don't go back 60 years, but if we go back 50 years, excuse me, Doc, I don't go back 50 years. I wasn't around in 1966. Well, I was around in 1966. And an example that I like to use is appliances. So if we look at the year 2016, right, and if you think about where you can buy appliances, right, the types of retailers that you can buy appliances at, you can buy them at, these things called appliance stores still exist, but if you go back 50 years, pretty much the only place you bought appliances was at an appliance store. That's why they were called appliance stores. You said, oh, appliance store. I need an appliance. I will go to an appliance store. Today, by contrast, you can buy appliances at the Walmarts of the world. You can buy them in department stores. You can buy them in electronic stores like Best Buy. You can buy them in big box category killers like Home Depot. So there's a lot of different kinds of places, right? And right as these stores, as the physical footprint of a number of stores continues to get bigger, that muddies the product line categorization as well. Because if I were to ask you a question, what is Walmart? You would say, I don't like Walmart. Well, I don't care whether you like Walmart or not. That's not the issue. But from a product line perspective, what is Walmart? Because in 2016, and this wasn't always the case, in fact, it wasn't the case up until the last 10 years, Walmart is the largest grocery by sales. Walmart sells the most grocery products of any retailer in the United States. But who thinks of Walmart as a grocery store, right? But you can buy grocery products at a number of Walmarts, right? And a substantial number of grocery products. So the whole product line thing, it's getting more difficult because retailers are doing lots of different things to try to appeal to customers, and you got this whole like I said, this retail convergence concept going on, and so and you've got people who are like one-stop shopping, and if you think of a Wegmans, or if you think of a Giant Eagle, or if you think of a Publix if you're down in the South, right? You go into those grocery stores and there's like flower shops and there's bakeries, and in some of them they have banks, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. When did this turn into something that doesn't look like a grocery store, right? So we've talked about intermediaries, excuse me, retailers, in terms of their amount of services provided, in terms of their organizational approaches, and as well as the product lines. And so what I'd like to spend a little bit of time on to finish up this discussion of marketing intermediaries is the concept known as multi-channel marketing. And multi-channel marketing is almost ubiquitous today, unlike 40 or 50 years ago. And what multi-channel marketing refers to is marketing using a number of different channels to reach a consumer. So multi-channel marketing refers to marketing using a number of different channels to reach a customer or consumer. And these things, this multi-channel has become ubiquitous, largely because of the growth of technology over the last 20 years. And so, many retailers now have both brick and mortar locations as well as web locations. And interestingly enough, some companies that have historically been web-based are now looking to or have added brick and mortar locations. So for example, Amazon, which started out as a, what they call a pure play online retailer. Amazon has a retail location and is looking to add retail locations throughout the United States. And one of the things that I like to focus on with this discussion of multi-channel marketing is me being a logistics guy. The logistics associated with multi-channel marketing um, have created a lot of challenges for organizations. So, to give you an example, Walmart, and I keep on going back to Walmart because Walmart's, whether you like Walmart or whether you don't like Walmart, Walmart has for a long time been a leading company in terms of retail logistics. And part of it is that Walmart, really did a much better job at logistics than did a lot of other retailers. But Walmart has really struggled uh, in competing with Amazon because what Walmart has come to learn and what a lot of the old brick and mortar retailers or historically brick and mortar retailers have come to learn is that the logistics associated with doing stuff that's going to a store is a lot different than the logistics of doing stuff that's going to an individual's house. And so if you think about it, a lot of times what's happening is that that Walmart would resupply a Walmart store from a Walmart distribution center. And those things are huge. Dr. Watts, who's a operations management, supply chain management professor here, he and I were in Bentonville and Fayetteville, Arkansas earlier this year, and we got to tour one of Walmart's distribution centers in Fayetteville. This thing was, 1,200,000 square feet. I mean, these things are huge, and they supply a lot of, the Walmarts and in some cases Sam's Clubs as well in the Bentonville, Fayetteville area. But the logistics of getting stuff to a store, you send it from a distribution center and you send it in a big, maybe 53-foot long truck. You can't send 53-foot long trucks into a neighborhood to deliver, whatever it is you've ordered from Walmart.com. So, one of the real battle points now, one of the real battlegrounds is the learning that's going on among retailers that are involved in trying to be competitive with the Amazons of the world in online or web-based retailing. And so multi-channel marketing and increasingly one of the terms that's now being used is something called omni-channel marketing. And I want to spend a great deal of time talking about omni-channel marketing, but your book does a nice job of talking about omni-channel marketing. It basically takes multi-channel, and what omni-channel is trying to do is make things a seamless experience so that it doesn't matter, for example, where you order the product from or where it's delivered from. And so what omni-channel now is doing is giving the consumer a seamless purchasing experience. And what's starting to happen is that things that it typically operated as retail stores, right, are now not only being retail stores, but they're acting as kind of distribution or fulfillment centers to some extent for people who are ordering a product online but choose to pick it up in a store. So there's a lot of interesting things that are going on, and that's one of the reasons that I like to talk about multi-channel marketing with respect to marketing intermediaries, because the multi-channel marketing has a tremendous impact on a number of retailers. So getting close to 20 minutes, we'll stop there. See you down the road. Bye.